What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Cosmic Campfire, where the seats are plenty and the fire is always warm. So gather round. It's been a pretty regular week for me. I have mostly just been helping the kids with school. I've been spending a lot of time with the family and spending plenty of time working on production and, personal projects, I guess. So, like I said, it's been a pretty run of the mill week. There wasn't any special events, there wasn't anything too crazy going on. So, all in all, solid week. I'm excited to talk about the Cosmic Campfire and what I've been working on over the course of the week. Last week I talked a little bit about Cobra Kai and how interesting that was as a storytelling vehicle, the way that they used camera work and colors and music and themes to help bring kind of suck you back into like that 1980s martial arts culture that the Karate Kid came from. So that was really cool. This week I want to talk a little bit about a comic book called Big Girls Number One. It's published by Image Comics. It is written and illustrated and colored and maybe even lettered by Jason Howard. So the first one came out probably 3 to 4 weeks ago. The second issue is due out today, this week. And so as I was going back and reading through the first issue to refresh myself, I noticed there was a lot of really cool breadcrumbs being dropped, and so there's a really strong sense of storytelling there because it's not the kind of thing like it did a lot of world building in this first issue, and it left a lot of breadcrumbs, but it all feels very organic and intentional. you know um Essentially the story of Big Girls is a post-apocalyptic future in a way. They have this preserve, which is like a city that has these towers around it, and there are monsters, basically like kaiju, that are outside of this perimeter. And the big girls are these giant girls that defend the city center, the preserve. So they have this arrangement of towers around the outer edge to provide kind of like an early warning system for when these monsters show up. That kind of reminds me of Evangelion, the way that they were always watching for angels. So if the angels showed up, they sent the Ava units out into the city to stop them before they got to the important stuff. That's kind of how Big Girls operates. They are defensive, but also preventative. And so to me, that was really interesting. That's really cool because it's, like I said, it's clearly pulling on, some anime strings there, some manga strings. Say, like Attack on Titan definitely feels like something that influenced this concept. And yeah, so this first issue was really cool. You have these big monstrous creatures that are basically little boys that or I guess the male of the species, they grow up to turn into monsters and they start changing after their third birthday. Girls, on the other hand, are also affected by the mega organism that creates this mutation, but it only makes them giant. It doesn't actually mutate them into monsters. It's just a change in, I guess, their DNA or their genetic code. Regardless, there's this government agency that's called the Preserve, and it operates kind of in this shadowy way, a lot like the Men in Black, but they work with the big girls, in conjunction to help save and protect this. I guess it's basically like they're in like a destroyed old city, but there's only a certain part of that city that really has all of the resources needed to be sustainable. And so that itself is also called the preserve. And so the girls work for the preserve to protect the preserve. Anyway, one of the big breadcrumbs here is that whenever I'm not sure exactly where this mega organism came from. I don't know if it was created by humans or if it was like a virus or something, a novel virus, I guess, that showed up out of nowhere and they discovered it. But it sounds like they were basically experimenting with this mega organism, trying to figure out something, and things went wrong. It sounds like one of the boys was infected with it and it messed them up. And so now they have like all these kaiju monsters out in the wild. And the scientists that have created that basically, most of them were lost in the mistake, as they call it. So that leads to this really neat situation of like they have to live with where they're at and what's going on, I guess. Because not only has science failed them, but they no longer have enough scientists or like human population to even figure out what's going on. Like they're beyond the point of being saved by science. They just have to fight for their lives every day from now on. And a big part of the reason that is because most of them were killed in the mistake. So their mistake cost them their lives, but now it's cost humanity almost everything. And yeah, that's a really cool breadcrumb because one, it eliminates the question of like why don't they just fix this, or like if they know that it's a mega organism or whatever, then how do they prevent that? Seems like science could solve this. Well, there's not any scientists, or there's at least not enough scientists to figure this out. So all the like research and data was lost and stuff. So it's kind of a mess because they don't have any way to stop these things. They don't really know what to do other than to keep fighting, and they were fortunate enough to have the big girls to help defend them. There's also one of the main characters. He has a. It seems like he had a son, and his son mutated into one of these kaiju. We don't know exactly what has happened to the son, I don't believe, but it gives us some insight because there's points where it's brought up, like they could find a cure or something, and he says, no, science already failed us. So this is somebody who doesn't believe in science and all of that, and he expresses that, and it definitely seems to be connected to the fact that his son mutated as well and he has lost him. So I'm excited to see where all these breadcrumbs go. There's a lot of other little things. They talk about this character named Apex who hasn't even shown up. The main character Ember, she kind of like seems to have come into her own in this first issue, and it sounds like Apex is slated to show up in the second one. Apex is basically like the preserves go-to person. Like she's the big girl, and so it sounds like she's going to show up, which could cause some conflicts between her and the leadership and Ember and everything that happened in that first issue that she was absent for because she was already on a mission. I'm sure she's a sort of an alpha female, and she is definitely not going to be happy that somebody else did her job. So I want to see how like that conflict plays out. I want to see how things go with um, Ember and like Mr. Tannic, I believe. Basically her handler, the Men in Black like main guy, I guess. So I'm excited to see how this book plays out. Like I said, Big Girls number 2 is out today, so I'll be grabbing that, and I'm really excited to find out what is going to happen next. If you've been following along, then at the end of episode 3, I had kind of whittled it down to what I wanted the main character to be like, what I wanted his sidekick to be like, that we needed an OS or some sort of Android or computer to be our eyes into the world. And the other big thing I had going on in that one was that I needed a MacGuffin to send my character on an adventure. And so I developed the Cosmic Campfire as kind of like this place of solitude. There would be, I think, something good for him to chase. And so then that's what I've been working on this week. So my process for writing, I'm a big fan of Dan Harmon. I think his work is incredible, and the way that his mind works really interests me as like a creative writing type. And I don't really go by the hero's journey or the hero circle or whatever you want to call it. Honestly, because I just like I haven't really grasped it yet. It's an incredibly powerful tool. It allows you to create a journey out of just about anything, but there's parts of it I don't quite understand. And so right now the way I'm handling things is just, staring that traditional 3 act structure right in the eyes, because like I said, I'm a big believer in what Dan Harmon is doing, and I think there is some sort of science to this creative art. And if we can find a way to make this easier, I think that will be a lot of fun. So that's really where I'm approaching this from personally, is just like this kind of like analytic thinking about how to craft this story. The way I start that whole process, though, is basically this: I write down Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then I try to put like one, maybe two sentences under each of those sections that kind of tells me when, where, and how this story should progress. And then I take all of that and I basically copy paste that, and then I try to expand each of those little sections out and figure out exactly where it's all going. So, this is how I started this time. Act 1. This is the first part of the story, and whatever happens should be set up and launched from the end of this section. Act 2. In Act 2, our hero learns and grows. This is the bulk of the story, and it is the heart of what our character learns. And Act 3. This is the end of the story, where the character realizes that what he sought was never meant to be sought in the first place. So, I mean, it's that simple. That's what I start with. That could probably apply to literally every story that's ever been told, but it kind of gets the gears turning in my brain. It starts to focus my creative energies, and so I start to expand those out. And so I just copy paste those down below it, and then I go back and start rewriting. Unfortunately, at this point, I have not written anything extra for Act 2 or 3, but I'm definitely going to give you what I wrote down for Act 1, and there's even another bit after that. So I think this is a good insight into what my process is. That way, people can reach out to me and explain if I'm doing this right, if I'm doing it wrong, how they would do it better, what are good tweaks for this. I'm sure there's somebody out there that started doing it the same way and realized long ago that this is a bad way to do it. Please let me know if you've already experienced this so I can learn how to do it better. Okay, so going back to Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, I had my little 1 to 2 sentences in each one. Now I've copy pasted that below. Here's what I put down for Act 1 once I started to expand that out. This hero struggles with society. Not that they can't cope, just that other people don't make sense to him. People are people, and this one just wants to be left alone. Legend tells of a place beyond the stars where no one will bother you. The protagonist lives in the middle of nowhere, but people continue to show up and bother him. Salesmen, friends, neighbors. It makes no sense to him, and he just wants to be left alone. After a visit from a neighbor, he feels frustrated, and then someone else shows up. But this act ends when a new salesman shows up with a map to the Cosmic Campfire. So, as you can probably tell, a lot of that makes no sense, but I think each of those sentences on their own kind of shape a certain, different aspects and different points of the story. And so that's kind of where I move down to the next section with all of that going on in my head. And again, I basically just copy pasted what I had, and then I go in and start expanding out everything as I kind of like come up with more ideas for it. This is what I have written for Act 1. This does include, I would call this pretty much a scene. Um, it's got dialogue, it's got character direction, it's got a little bit of everything. So let me read that part, and then I'll discuss a little bit more about what was going on here. So, Act 1. Well, that's it for the day. Okay, so Act 1. Well, that's the last of it for today. Thanks, John. Last collection of the morning, and the sun is barely coming up. I should be done before noon today. Sounds great, Ron. I might even call it early. You're the only person I have lined up to stop by today. John limped back to the house as Ron secured the vacuum seals on his trailer. Don't want none of these grounds to escape. See you next month, John. John simply raised his hand over his shoulder as he reached the back porch. He heard the truck start and pull away as he entered the kitchen and made himself a fresh cup of coffee and some breakfast. Just about the time he sat down and pulled up the latest news feed, the back door swung open. Great. Looks like my morning is shot. What is it today, Gina? Don't be so grumpy. You know you love to see me. That's a stretch. I made fresh coffee if you want some. Gina goes to the fridge and pulls out a bottle and cracks the seal. She pours some in a coffee cup and puts it in the microwave. I'll take some of the pressed stuff if you don't mind. I can't drink that old-fashioned stuff. You mean the way coffee is supposed to be made? You're probably the only person that still drinks that stuff. It's way better pressed out. Takes the edge off. Takes the flavor out of it is what you mean. As the news plays in the background, there's a knock at the front door. You have visitors? That isn't like you. Probably a salesman. Don't answer it. You can't do that. We don't get many visitors out here. Don't waste his time. Waste his time? He's wasting my time. I don't need whatever. Before John could get the words out, Gina had already bounded to the front door and pulled it open. Hi! So, like I said, it's incomplete at the moment. It probably needs a ton of editing. I don't have any specific intention for how I'm writing this story, like what format. That's definitely probably more dialogue than you would get in a comic book. And so, yeah, that would probably turn into just like a comic book of word balloons. At the same time, I guess it could kind of work as a movie. As prose, I don't trust my writing that much. So we'll see. Let me know on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube under New Guy, Nuexguy. So that's where I'm at on that. Everybody, let me know on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube under New Guy, Nuexguy. I guess the information or the feedback I'm looking for this week is: does this dialogue sound okay? Does it sound like it's coming from multiple characters, or does it sound like everybody is just the same person? And where should this conversation with the salesman go? What's the best way for me to get from him standing at the front door to them going on an adventure because of the item he tried to sell? And the other thing I want to know is, what is your process? How do you write? I'm sure the way that I'm doing things right now, somebody's probably already done this and learned from all the mistakes, and they've come up with a way better way. So please reach out to me. Let me know what I could do better, how I could do better, and what is the process? Am I right? Am I wrong? What's going on here? I'm not totally sure, but I'm trying to learn, and I hope you're excited to learn with me. So, until next time, I'll keep the fire warm.